Hello, welcome to Movies I Love with yours truly, Nomfanelo Malloy. So this one is going to be a little bit different. So instead of focusing on one film, I'll be focusing on multiple. So today I will be talking about John Wick Chapters 1, 2, and 3 in honor of the release of Chapter 4, which I have not seen yet as of the time of this recording. So all three movies are directed by Chad Stahelski, who's known for directing the John Wick films, and he was a stuntman, or I guess still is, I'm not sure, and a stunt coordinator on films such as the Matrix trilogy. The franchise, is based on the characters created by Derek Kolstad, who's known for writing scripts such as Nobody and Die Hard. The film starred Keanu Reeves as the titular character, John Wick. So, the first film, which came out in 2014, focuses on John Wick trying to find the men that were responsible for breaking to his home that led to his car being stolen and his dog Daisy died, which, of course, was a gift from his late wife, Helen. Chapter 2, which came out in 2017, has Wick being forced to honor a debt from his past by assassinating a target that he doesn't really want to do but has to. But then he is ultimately betrayed by the person that forces him to complete that task, and shenanigans ensue. And Chapter 3, which came out in 2019, has Wick on the run because he broke the rules of the Continental at the end of Chapter 2. So essentially, he has a $14 million contract put on him, and he essentially uses his limited resources to stay alive. Now, I have seen all three movies in theaters, and I do plan to see the fourth one in theaters when it comes out. And I would have to say I thoroughly enjoyed them. Looking back now, like I never imagined that we would get a franchise out of these movies because with the first movie, it kind of seemed like a one and done. But then, but then also too, there was potential, I guess, for the world, I guess, of the films to be further explored, which happens in chapters 2 and 3. So I would say if I had to choose which film of the franchise is my favorite, I would say the first one because the first one is more grounded, and I would say like the story is more personal as he's essentially trying to avenge like the death of his dog that was from his late wife. And I just liked how like with that one wasn't just like an action movie for the sake of action, if that makes sense. Because here, like it tries to make like an action movie more emotional through the story, which is why I connected with that one more. But I would say for the other films, like with the second one, I would say it's more focused in terms of the story, but I had some issues regarding the villain because the villain he was more of a jerk because I didn't get like I get that he wanted to get the seat at the table, like essentially replace his sister because he was jealous that I guess his family did not pick him, but they chose his sister instead, which I get. Yeah, he's jealous and all that stuff. But I didn't get why he had to bring John Wick into this. Like, I don't know, for me, it felt a bit of an excuse to rope John Wick into this, I guess, just to have something. But but yeah, outside of that, like I would say I liked how the movie kind of we start to get deeper into the world of the Continental. And then the third one obviously like goes into that further. And I would say the third one for me has like the best action scenes overall up in the franchise, but I would say the plot gets convoluted, particularly towards the later half of the movie, because essentially I think for me, that's what happens after when he meets the elder, where essentially John, he has to choose between death or he has to go after Winston, and he has to also cut a finger off to prove his loyalty, which he does. But then when it comes to doing that, he refuses. He's like, nope. And then we get like this huge like action sequence at the hotel. So for me, like with moments like that in the movie, it just did not make sense. But again, I enjoyed the action scenes with chapter three overall. So that's pretty much my thoughts like on the franchise so far. Why I love John Wick chapters one, two, and three? Well, the concept, because I like how in a ways this is set in an alternative universe, even though it looks quite familiar in New York. Because interesting how like with the use of the coins that they use for payment, like the marker, and like the rules of the Continental are established. Because I think the main one is that you cannot do business inside the Continental, otherwise there are severe consequences. Notably in chapter one with Miss Perkins, how she goes after John Wick at his hotel room, and she kills a member that's in the hotel. His name's Harry, I believe, and she ultimately gets killed by the Continental later in the movie. And also too with John Wick, with chapter two, when he decides to kill Santiago, even though the guy ultimately deserved it for putting John through hell, essentially, in chapter two. And essentially, John has to live with the consequences for his actions. I like too how the supporting characters they have their moments to shine, particularly with Winston and Sharon in chapters two and three, because it was just interesting for Sharon. I guess he takes in John Wick's dog in chapter three, and they have a nice banter there with them, and with Winston. I guess particularly in chapter three, how we see how close. I guess in chapter two, how close Winston and John Wick are with their relationship, even though they have their different, I guess, roles within the high table and so forth. So I found that was cool for them to have their moments to shine. And I like to like how John Wick, how he's essentially treated as like a myth or a legend, particularly in chapter one, after when Vigo learns that his son killed John Wick's dog and stole his car. He's like, oh shit, because he's treated as he's kind of portrayed as a scary person with John Wick because he was referred to as the boogeyman or the Baba Yaga. Because there's a line when Vigo says, he's the one that you sent to kill the boogeyman, which is interesting. And dogs. Dogs obviously have a huge role in this franchise. I would say particularly with chapter one because of Daisy connection to Helen, and also too with the dog that he chooses to adopt at the end of chapter one. And it's interesting that the dog doesn't have a name. So I guess he's referred to as Dog or the Dog, but hopefully he does get a name at some point, but we'll have to wait and see. And for me, also too, I love Keanu Reeves because he's great in not just the stunts, like the physical part, but also the emotional part, particularly with his performance. Because I like how he gets the best of two worlds essentially with his performance. Because I guess as an actor, it's great for him to showcase his range with this role, and I believe this was his comeback role. I'm not sure what happened before him landing this role, but it was just great to see him succeed like in a franchise that's outside of the Matrix. So good on him. And Also, too, mainly why I love these movies is the action sequences. I really like how that we actually get to see the stunts unfold on screen in full instead of using choppy editing or handheld camera movements. So there is handheld camera moments with this movie, but at least here it's used to enhance the story rather than using it as a distraction for the audience to not see what's happening on screen. And I love how with the hits they're very brutal and it's gory at times, but they're very brutal like with the hits. So good on that. And if I were to narrow it down in terms of my favorite sequences, I would say for chapter one will be the nightclub sequence when John is trying to find Yusuf at the club. And then you have chapter two with the whole reflections of the soul sequence, because I loved how the use of glass in the movie, which kind of pays a homage to the final fight sequence with Bruce Lee in Enter the Dragon. And with chapter three, it was kind of hard to narrow down. If I were to choose my ultimate favorites, I would say the whole Casablanca sequence with Sophia and her dogs where they're trying to escape. The whole sequence with the horse when John tries to grab the horse at the stable, and then when they're on the road, that was cool. And also too the whole glass sequence with Zero, because they're trying to play with a lot of illusion with that scene where they either disappear, reappear. So that one is cool. Now, in terms of like future expectations, I would love to see some of the supporting characters come back. I would say like with Aurelio, played by John Leguizamo, because he was in the first and the second one. So I thought like it was cool to see him, even though he wasn't there for a lot. It was cool to see him on screen. Also too with Jimmy, loved. I like to see Jimmy. He was also in the first and the second one because I love how him and John Wick have nice banter. Where like in the first movie, it's like, oh, noise complaint, and then the second one is like gas leak. So yeah, that one is cool. I would love to see both of those characters back. Also too, it'll be interesting to see Cassian come back, which was played by Common. Because what happened with him is that in the second movie, after him and John Wick have their fight scene, he gets stabbed in the chest and is told that if you pull the knife, you die. And then we see Cassian do like a wink, and then he just sits there at the subway station. So we don't know what happened to him. So it'll be cool, like if he comes back, or it might suggest that he actually died. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. And I think with the direction, because it'll be cool to see, I guess at this point, like John Wick versus the High Table. Because I think at the end of chapter three, they do kind of tease that because both him and the Bowery King, played by Lawrence Fishburne, are pissed off essentially how like they're kind of left to die essentially. So we'll have to see what happens in chapter four and beyond if it explores that further. And I do hope to like, even though like they're expanding the world of the franchise, like it'll be cool to see them going more like personal, like how they did with the first movie. I don't know how to accomplish that from a storytelling perspective, but it'll just be cool to see more emotions involved with the franchise going forward. So that's pretty much what I have to say on John Wick's chapter 1, 2, and 3. If you guys have not seen those movies, please check it out. I'll post a link in the description. And also, you can find a link to my socials in the description. And I want to say thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.